Good morning, everybody. Well, we enter into one of the most exciting or depressing, depending on your points of view, weeks in British politics that we will probably ever live through. And in that vein, the Prime Minister this morning, Theresa May, has written an article in the Sunday Express, and she says that this is the biggest and most important decision that any MP of our generation will be asked to make. And I agree with that. I have to say, I think this is certainly the most important vote we've had in the House of Commons since way back in 1972, when we originally joined what was then known as the Common Market. And it may even be as important in some ways as the vote way back in May 1940, the one that in the end displaced Chamberlain and let Churchill in as Prime Minister. This is a big moment in our national story. She also says in this article that a failure to deliver Brexit would be a catastrophic and unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy. And she's right. She's right for three reasons. The first is the referendum was an exercise in direct democracy. Normally, our MPs act as representatives, not delegates, as representatives. They make decisions and we judge once every 4 or 5 years whether they've done a good job or not. But in this case, we were given the decision. And remember, we were told over and over by everybody, including, of course, the Prime Minister, in that £9 million leaflet that came through every house in the land, we were told it was our decision and that it would be implemented. That's one reason why she's right to say that it would be an unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy. Secondly, almost exactly a year later, there was a general election in which the two big parties explicitly promised in their manifestos, and their leaders could not have made it clearer, that a vote for their parties was a vote to deliver Brexit. And thirdly, and this is something I don't think has really been focused on, and this really concerns members of Parliament. Back in March 2017, there was a debate about the triggering of Article 50. There was then a vote on the triggering of Article 50, and unbelievably, nearly 500 MPs, nearly 500, voted to trigger Article 50. Only 100 opposed it. A massive, overwhelming parliamentary majority of 384, I think the number was. And this is what Mrs May said as Article 50 was triggered.
Today, the government acts on the democratic will of the British people. And it acts too on the clear and convincing position of this House. A few minutes ago in Brussels, the United Kingdom's permanent representative to the EU handed a letter to the President of the European Council on my behalf, confirming the government's decision to invoke Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union. The Article 50 process is now underway, and in accordance with the wishes of the British people, the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union.
So it couldn't really have been simpler, because you see, what Article 50 says, and this is what 500 MPs voted for, backing up our vote in a referendum, backing up our vote in a general election where 85% of us voted for parties saying they would deliver Brexit. What Article 50 says is the treaties shall cease to apply to the state in question from the date of entry into force of the withdrawal agreement, or, and here's the key, failing that, 2 years after the notification. So the notification was the letter that was delivered that Theresa May spoke about in that piece. And it's clear what 500 MPs had agreed to was either we have a withdrawal agreement or in 2 years' time, namely March the 29th at 11 p.m. 2019, we just leave the European Union. It couldn't be simpler. And I have to say, I did think on that day, that's it, we've done it. This now simply can't be overturned. It's impossible. Surely our members of Parliament could not be that twisting, could not be that dishonest, that they would break not just the promise that our decision would be implemented, but their own explicit vote on this important legal document. But that, I fear, is where we now are. And I agree with the big picture. In fact, I could have written much of what Theresa May's written this morning. I agree with the big picture that Brexit must be delivered. The problem is that her withdrawal agreement is wholly unacceptable for reasons that we've debated ad infinitum on this programme. Therefore, we go to the other option that the House signed up to, and we leave with no deal. No deal, no problem. That doesn't, of course, mean that we haven't got to talk about how we deal with flights, etc., and much of that work, of course, is already going on. So let me ask you, because there are some other opinions out there, one of which, of course, comes from John Major, the former Prime Minister, who gives us some pretty grave warnings. You know, the benefits of leaving without a deal are close to zero. Every single household, rich or poor, will be worse off for many years to come. Jumping off a cliff has never had a happy ending, and this from the man who signed us up to the exchange rate mechanism that led to a year of record house repossessions and bankruptcies. He says now the only sensible course is for the government to revoke Article 50. So Johnny Major doesn't even want an extension of Article 50, just scrap the whole thing and the peasants will all come to heel in time. Well, I tell you what, I don't think they will. But forget John Major, I want to hear from you. That's what really matters here. Is Mrs May right when she says that no Brexit would be an unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy? And if you think, no, John Major and the gang are right, let's just scrap the whole thing. Let's just call it off. Let's just say that promises made to the electorate and by MPs when they voted don't matter. If that's how you feel, tell me why that's important. 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think that any delay at all would actually be incredibly damaging in terms of your faith in the whole democratic process. Maybe even bringing into question whether you would ever want to go and vote in any election ever again. And if that's how you feel, then please text to 84850. Or maybe you're one of those who already has given up and feels totally disenfranchised by the whole process. And I have to say, I met some in my local pub on Friday night who just feel they'll never, ever engage with politics again. If that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, Facebookers, you can comment there too. Simon is a new caller from Coventry. Good Sunday morning to you, Simon.
Good morning to you, Nigel. First time I've spoke to your good self. But you just said two words there, totally disenfranchised.
Yes.
And that just really, really sums up. Do you know what I feel? I feel ground down, totally ground down. I listened to the show before with Andrew, and he had an MP on there saying, 66% of her constituents voted to leave. Mm-hmm. And yet, no matter what, and I truly believe this woman, she's self-will just run riot. I mean, I truly believe that she believes in and I truly believe that most of our parliament believe truly that we need to stay. However, because the way we're going is we want to take the word democracy, just erase it from the English dictionary.
Bin it, yeah.
Because.
But Simon, what's interesting?
The position you're in when you've got people running on self-will, the whole idea. There's lots of things I want in life. I'm sure there's lots of things you want. However, and I believe in them wholeheartedly. However, when I speak to my family and I put it, it's a family discussion or it's whatever situation I'm in, you go with the conscience of a group. We went, when we voted in 2016, with the conscience of a country. And that's just been taken, just bit by bit, we've just been ground down and told.
But if you're ground down, Simon,
we know better.
Simon, if you are feeling ground down, then Alistair Campbell's winning. Lord Adonis is winning. Nick Clegg is winning. Because if you're being ground down, that very phrase intimates to me that maybe you're close to giving up.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a positive. For the last 3 weeks, I've got myself from Coventry to London, and I've been standing in the middle of roads, and you know what I get for that? I get ground down for that as well. I'll get called a racist, and all the things that poor old Anna Soubry gets called. And
poor old Anna Soubry.
Exactly. I've sat and I've watched the stuff that people, physically fought, trying to hit you and being successful in it. Nothing gets said. That's why people feel ground down, because we just get labelled. This is a whole thing now.
Well, Simon, if I'm right, and bear in mind, I have been the most pessimistic of all the Brexiteers now for some time. I could see a long time ago where this was going. I think, and I really hope I'm wrong, Simon, but I think what they're going to do to us is they're going to extend Article 50. Yeah. I think in time they will probably be able to force a second referendum upon us. I'm not certain of that, but they may. And we have two, I have two choices. You have two choices. One is that we allow ourselves to be ground down, we give up and let them win. The other is that we're defiant.
Yeah. Do you know what? In 1972, I was a year or two short of voting. And let me tell you this. I've had to put up with 40-odd years of the result there. I didn't have the option to go back and say, sorry, I was too young to vote then. Can I have another vote? It's not about you.
I know.
It's not about you, old fuckers that have paid into the system all your life. It's about my future. Well, my future's, I'm on the autumn of my years now. But I had to go. I had to live by the vote that was taken back in the 70s.
Yep, you did.
The people,
Simon, let me just finish, because a lot of people want to speak on this. Let me just finish. If it does come to a second referendum, will you be ground down and stay at home, or out there and defiant?
I will not. I will be out there on the streets. I will be in the ballot box. But
okay.
what I have a genuine fear that it will be stitched up, because we crept up on them last time and they didn't know what hit them.
Well,
now they're ready for us. I fear a lot of brown.
Well, that depends. That depends on the public ultimately. And now, Simon, very, very strongly feeling that what's happening, and agreeing with me that what's happening is an outrage, is monstrous at every level. But he's feeling ground down, and that's interesting. That may be a win for the other side. 0345 6060 973 if you think John Major's right, which simply just should revoke Article 50. I'm off to Palmer's Green to speak to Mark. Mark, good morning.
Very good morning to you, Nigel. I feel a little bit like that last caller, to be honest with you, a bit ground down, but I will carry on fighting. There's no way I'm ever going to give up. Now, I saw a video of Dominic Raab on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And the interviewer said to him, it looks like Parliament are taking control of this whole Brexit situation now, and, they won't allow leaving on the WTO terms with all the amendments they are throwing at it from, Dominic Grieve, etc. And Dominic Raab said, well, as much as a pain in the proverbial all these amendments are, the legal default position in the event of a no deal being found is we are leaving on the 29th of March on WTO terms.
Yes, Mark.
It is in the power of the government.
Yes, Mark.
None of these amendments can...
Yes, Mark. All of that, according to parliamentary history, tradition, according to parliamentary precedent, all of that is absolutely true. There's just one little problem. Well, he's very little, really, isn't he? And he's called John Bercow. And what he showed us over the course of the last week is that he is prepared to ignore the legal advice he's given from the clerks of the House of Commons, overturn parliamentary precedent, and yes, the way things work, it's only the executive, namely the government, that can put forward legislative changes before the House of Commons. We could be within days of Speaker Bercow changing that, and that's the problem, Mark.
You know what a disgrace. So impressed was I with Crispin Blunt the other day. Mm-hmm. I stood up and I gave that man a round of applause in my front room when he said a referee should always be neutral.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Speaker of the House
absolutely.
Is not. Absolute blooming disgrace.
I'm with you. I thought Crispin Blunt summed it up beautifully. Thank you. Folks, tell me, if you think it's right for John Bercow to completely do away with centuries of precedent in Parliament, if you think it's right for Parliament to take back power from the people to be able to overturn their decision, please on this Sunday morning call 0345 6060 973 and tell me why, because I don't get it. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, and it's now 17 minutes past 10. An unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy is what the Prime Minister says it will be if Brexit is stopped, and she is on that point right. You don't often hear me saying Theresa May's right, but on that point she's right. Doesn't mean her deal's the solution. No, it's not. I'm against the deal, but that's okay, because under Article 50, which 500 members of Parliament voted for, it's perfectly clear that either we have a withdrawal agreement or we simply leave at 11 p.m. on March the 29th. That is what people, our MPs, voted for by an overwhelming majority. And, Philip says to me on Twitter, well, the argument that 80% of voters voted for pro-Brexit parties makes me livid. I voted Tory because my party still contains strong voices for Remain. Do you think 16 million voters have just disappeared? Well, Philip, that's fine, but your MP, there's a 90% chance, higher, that your MP voted for Article 50. So are you saying you voted for a liar? And it's interesting, actually, if you're voting Tory because they want to remain, and other people were voting Tory because they like the Jacob Rees-Mogg approach, it does begin to make you think, can our current party political system actually survive this Brexit storm? Or is it time, actually, these parties started to break up? And we may, after 11 o'clock, discuss some of that because it's fascinating. Now, Caroline on Facebook says, revoke Article 50. It's the sensible solution to protect the British people. What from, Caroline? Their own moronic stupidity? Is it that we're all thick and stupid? Is that why we need protecting from ourselves? Well, why not just get rid of all elections, Caroline? Just put someone like Peter Mandelson in charge for the next 30 years and say he's much cleverer and better than all the rest of you. That is how dangerous these arguments are, and it's always economics that's used. Johnny Major telling us it'll be bad for the economy, the man that virtually broke us through his own obsession with getting us into the euro. Chris is a new caller from Broadstairs down in Kent. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Nigel.
And welcome to LBC.
Thank you. The point I'd like to make is, I think at this moment in time, we have a parliament of rotten boroughs. They're all self-serving, they're not acting on the will of the people. You know, a couple of months ago, the government was held in contempt of Parliament. Mm-hmm. I think Parliament is in contempt of the British people, the people that have voted to leave. But the problem is, they will find a way, the establishment will find a way to revoke or even cancel Article 50. We'll have an election, but who do you vote for? They're both as bad as each other.
Do you really think we're going to have an election, Chris?
They will do, they have to at some point.
Well, yeah, okay. All right, okay, yeah. I buy that. Okay, you got me there, in a way. But do you really think... I mean, I don't think there is going to be an election. Because no. I can't see the Tory party wanting an election, and certainly not wanting one where Theresa May is still in charge, and especially after she promised, although she's quite good at breaking them, but she promised she wouldn't lead them into another election. Also, you know, the DUP may well be fuming about this withdrawal agreement, but they don't particularly want to give Corbyn a chance, do they?
Well, they don't. But then, who do you know? If we do go to an election, who would you vote for? Wow. They're all as bad as each other.
Well, that is a very good question. And the other question, Chris, of course, if there was an election, is what would it solve?
Well, nothing, because the status quo would be just even if Corbyn got in, neither party want Brexit.
Wow.
Or at least the MPs don't.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, you could argue there are more people in the Tory party that want Brexit, but the kind of Brexit they want is Mrs May's Brexit, which isn't Brexit at all. Chris, no. Is your prediction that there will be a general election? Is that what you're sticking with?
I think we would not come out of the Article 50, will not be invoked, and we will have an election in the summer.
All right, Chris, thank you. I hope you're wrong, but it's a possibility. Ben is a new caller from Richmond. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Nigel.
So, would this be a breach of our democracy? Is Theresa May right with this headline this morning?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in my opinion, when the referendum was held in 2016, it was a clear choice that was given to the British people. Parliament had been at odds over this for 40-odd years. The government had been split, so... You know, this was a rare case of direct democracy that was given to the people, and for this not to be fulfilled would be really, really dangerous territory for our politics.
Now, Chris Grayling was suggesting, it's front page of Daily Mail yesterday, that if Brexit's not delivered, it would lead to a rise of the far right it could even be the far left, of course, but do you think Grayling's right to warn that?
Personally, yes. I mean, all you've really got to do is look at Europe and look at all the parties that are on the rise in Europe. The UK has shunned many of this, and I personally think quite rightly. I would think the far left and the far right are as bad as each other, but something like this being overturned would ultimately lead to forces like that being unleashed, I think.
It's interesting you say that, because I was looking earlier on this morning, Ben, at The Sun, and Tony Parsons, who writes a weekly column in The Sun, and the headline, Ben, of his piece this morning is, if the elite block Brexit, the future will be revolting. So he rather thinks that too. So what are we to do, Ben? I mean, if we are absolutely appalled by what has already happened, let alone what will happen in the next week, 10 days, what should we do, Ben?
I'm a Conservative member. I'm young. I mean, I'm only 25, but I'm a Conservative member. All of the polls show that the Conservative Party base, like the grassroots, are really, really calling out for a Brexiteer Prime Minister, you know, somebody who will come to the front and lead us in the direction that we need. Like, this is, in my opinion, this has been a concerted establishment effort to delay and frustrate Brexit at every point, you know. Like, Parliament is full of Remainers.
Now, there is talk, Ben, there is talk that tomorrow we might see something from Jean-Claude Juncker. It'll have to be the morning with him, of course, or perhaps Donald Tusk, that we might see some sort of letter of comfort coming from Brussels. Do you think that'll change the mind of backbench Tory MPs?
I mean, I hope not, to be honest. The backstop well, the backstop is awful, obviously, but we need to move on. Like the referendum was a clear choice between the future of a bright, independent, sovereign Britain looking to the future and able to do free trade deals with the world. It was a really positive case, and we need to get back to that. I think we need full national independence and just be able to make our own way in the world, really.
If Ben, the party of which you're a 25-year-old member, which is quite young, because the average age of the Conservative Party is about 67, I think. So you are one of the youngsters. If the party of which you're a member and which you clearly, support, but you're a confirmed Brexiteer, if that party ends up not delivering a proper Brexit, would you look for alternatives?
I think we definitely need to. I mean, potentially people like, yourself and Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis, Boris Johnson. Something needs to happen. All of the polling show that Conservative grassroots members prefer no deal to May's deal. We need a leader to come through and really take us who knows in a better direction.
Who knows what's going to happen. Ben, thanks for your call. Thanks for your passion. Manjit lives in Peterborough and is a regular caller to this show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you? I know. Yeah.
I just, it's funny. I first said, Manji, 13 months ago that I feared the great Brexit betrayal had begun. And everyone laughed, of course. Everyone laughed, of course. And I was told by all the Tories, don't be so ridiculous. It's going to be absolutely fine, Nigel. Nothing to worry about, old boy. But, I sort of... And I'm still very pessimistic, and I just hope I'm proved wrong. But Manji, on this point, trust is the very thing that keeps our financial system going. It's the very thing that keeps our political system going. When you have trust, I don't think people feel the need to go and riot.
Right.
Because we have a system that you can believe in. Is Theresa May right to warn on that big point?
Well, I think Theresa May's legacy is going to be the lady that destroyed the Conservative Party, and to all those MPs in Parliament, the disgrace that you have made yourselves unelectable for the next 5, at least, elections, because you've just proved that whatever the British public say, you don't give a damn. You will do exactly what you want to do, and you don't give no credence or any respect to the British public. So you've destroyed the trust in Parliament. The Prime Minister's destroyed the trust in the country, and we're no better than any tin pot country. So next time a dictator decides to massacre his people or go ahead and overturn an election result and say, no, I've won, we will not be able to stay.
But she says, Manji,
say nothing to him whatsoever.
But she says, Manji, if you vote for her deal on Tuesday, all of the right things will be delivered.
No, we go out on WTO rules. We go out, as we said on the referendum, no deal. Out of Europe, and we go out, and we will survive. Why have we got no passion, no love or respect for our own people, for our own country? What is the matter with us, Nigel? We've got no faith. We have to rely on people like Mr. Adonis telling us how to cross the road because we're too thick. Is that what it's come to now?
I think it might have done. Manjit, I tell you what, you said we'll survive. I'm going to take issue with you there. I think we'll thrive.
We'll thrive. We'll prosper. I'm sorry. We will thrive. We'll prosper. And we will get through it. Okay, there's always a few problems. There'll be a few problems. But that is what happens, though. And we will get through it, though. But all we hear is doom and gloom on one side. That's all we keep hearing. Mr. Mandelson and Mr. Adonis, all the rest of them.
They're trying to grind us down, Manjit. They're trying to grind us down. But you're still defiant. I can tell that.
It is, Nigel, making some sort of effect. Is grinding people down. But I'll guarantee you one thing. I'm not going to let this grind me down as much as...
I can tell. Manjit, great to talk to you as it always is. Thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 10:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysikos. There'd be an unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy if Brexit is not delivered, says Prime Minister Theresa May in today's Sunday Express. And I have to say, with that big statement, I do agree with her. Before I get back to that, a lot of talk... we had a previous caller in the last half hour about Anna Soubry. And if you remember, she was being interviewed on the platforms on College Green opposite Westminster, and they were chanting Soubry as a Nazi. They then sort of walked around slightly menaced her as she was heading to the House of Commons, and an arrest was made yesterday. James Goddard was arrested yesterday for a potential breach of the peace. I just want to say this. I have absolutely no truck with Goddards and those types. In fact, this is why I've left UKIP, because they've started to get involved with that party. They're a frightful bunch of louts, all right? But if you go back through the history of British politics, all right, you will see that being heckled, having abuse shouted at you, has been there since the dawn of the democratic process. It is almost the right of the public to say unpleasant things about public figures who've decided to put their heads over the parapet and stand for office. I do hope that this arrest has not been made because of what was said, because if calling someone a Nazi is grounds for being arrested, then I can tell you the Metropolitan Police, I've got a list of several hundred names for you of people who didn't just say things to me, but hit me over the head, wrote off my car, menaced my children. And here's the point. You know, John McDonnell yesterday was at a protest, and somebody on the platform who was talking about austerity suggested that Theresa May shoot herself. Well, that isn't just abuse. You could argue that's almost ever so slightly insightful. What I am saying here is I don't approve of the behaviour we've had down at College Green, and I've been at the end of some of it myself. I haven't mentioned it because I'm so used to it. I've had years of it. But I do think if we're going to start protecting politicians from nasty things being said to them and about them, we're in the wrong place. And if the police do not apply the law evenly, it will lead to even more upset and even more bad behaviour. So we've got to be very, very careful. People shouldn't be physically menaced. People shouldn't feel, threatened for their own personal safety just because they say things. They must be allowed to say those things. But being called nasty names of itself is not a reason to arrest people. Is not, and if it's going to be done, it'd have to be applied evenly, and you'd need to arrest thousands. So it doesn't make sense. Right, back to this debate. Phyllis on Facebook says, if they don't deliver Brexit, we will never trust politicians again, though the majority don't even trust them now. Phyllis, I thought rather agreeing with that. Richard says, everyone knew that Brexit was doomed when Article 50 was not triggered immediately. It took 9 months, Richard, a full gestation before it was triggered. And yes, I was a little nervous in that period too. By SMS, I voted Remain, Nigel. I think leaving was the wrong choice. But the country said leave. We must leave, not half leave, and certainly not sabotage the leave. If we stay now, the EU will see us as weak and pathetic. We will never be respected again. Whoever sent that, on Friday, I had a meeting with a couple of Australian public figures, really quite well-known political public figures from Australia. And they said, we kind of grew up seeing you as the big, powerful mother country that always ever so slightly looked down their noses at us. At least that's how we felt. And we were sort of brought up to be told that we respected you and we respected the Queen and we thought you were a great country. They said to me, do you know what? We think you're a laughingstock now. And I think much of the rest of the world does too. Andrew is a new caller from Colchester. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Nigel.
So, is the Prime Minister... I think the Prime Minister's deal's awful, but is she right to talk about this unforgivable breach of trust?
She is, but my point is that we have a parliamentary democracy in this country. We elect MPs to represent us. They take the advice of very qualified civil servants.
I know.
And they make decisions on our behalf.
Normally,
we don't have the expertise to keep up to speed with everything.
Normally, Andrew, yes, that's the case. But this referendum was different, wasn't it? This referendum was...
Well, the expectation went up too high because people thought it was a decision rather than advisory.
We were told by absolutely everybody, we will implement the result. Well, hang on, Andrew. Hang on. Listen, by the way, I completely understand what you're saying. In normal circumstances, we're living in a representative democracy. I completely understand that. But my point to you, Andrew, is this is different because, number one, we were given the decision and told it wasn't advisory, that it would be implemented. It was backed up by the promises in a general election. And then all these MPs who are now saying no deal's unacceptable, well, they voted for the very clauses in Article 50, Andrew, that I read out earlier.
I agree with you. And therefore, that's their mistake. They've made a complete and utter faux pas when it came to actually the way they've sold this to the public, the way they've dealt with it. That is the error. Now, what my main point was, though, is that we have a democracy. We have a parliament that we refer to. And the whole campaign of the referendum was to take back control. People felt that Europe was taking control of our laws, of our economy, and everything. So we wanted our Parliament to make those decisions for us. There's a certain irony now that our Parliament is now debating the whole thing, is sitting down and spent 2.5 years debating it, trying to actually understand what the whole thing means. And then when they actually come to a conclusion on it, after huge amounts of work from the civil service and from the MPs, everyone's up in arms saying that the people we've given control back to haven't come up with the best decision in our interests.
Andrew, I'm going to take strong issue with you and disagree with you. Sovereignty does not rest in Parliament, it rests with the people. And we lend that power to MPs at elections for a period of time, and their job at the next election is to give us back that power, and we then choose who to lend it to for the next period. It's the sovereignty of the people that matter, ultimately. And we've made this decision not once, but twice. We were reassured by our MPs voting for Article 50. And now what is going on, Andrew, is, I put it to you, nothing less than a total act of betrayal.
That's the problem. It's now being sold as such because it was cocked up in the first place in respect of how it was sold to the general public. And the general public have now had these expectations risen when actually the whole thing would be an economic disaster.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, everyone will go straight on to WTO rules. It'll all be hunky-dory.
Yeah.
Well, have people actually looked at how the WTO template fits in with our economic structure?
Yes, and I think has everybody in detail done that? No. But, Andrew, isn't the point that under WTO, we have a £39 billion featherbed to get us started. We have the ability to make our own laws and to become more competitive and to strike out across the rest of the world and do whatever we want to do. Look, Andrew, you can tell me it won't work economically. I can tell you it will work economically. And we had these debates about the euro and all the rest of it. But isn't this ultimately... This is a question of our democracy, isn't it? And wouldn't it be...
It is now, yeah, that's the trouble.
But hang on, it was from the beginning, wasn't it? Would it not be an outrage if Brexit was stopped or delayed?
The issue I can see coming forward is...
I'm asking you, would it be an outrage? Would it be an outrage, yes or no?
I fear for civil unrest.
Do you?
If it was.
In modern times, we haven't seen much civil unrest in this country, have we?
No, we haven't. No. I mean, the poll tax, I think, is one of the last big riots I can remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I fear that we could have another Joe Cox if we go for a second referendum. I fear that if they do block it, where that's going to lead in respect of civil unrest. I fear for our future democracy. But ultimately, I want to stay. But I fear for our democracy because the total thing is a total and utter mess. So
isn't the answer, Andrew, then, I mean, given where you are with this, wouldn't the lesser of two evils be that we leave on WTO and avoid all of those things?
In the end, I've come to the conclusion that WTO would be an economic disaster.
Right.
I've come to the conclusion that Theresa May's deal, whilst I'm a Remainer, would be a good compromise and allow the country to move on from this complete paralysis that we have.
Right. Okay.
And if we go through a no Brexit, the whole thing would turn into a civil unrest and a complete and utter mess. I mean, the whole country's fallen out with each other already. God knows what would happen in a second referendum.
Okay. So you've come to the view then that Mrs May's deal is the compromise that we have to go for.
Unfortunately, I don't like it. But
okay. All right.
In the end, we're going to have to go with it.
Great debate. Thank you, Andrew. And Andrew, and you can sort of see then there are millions of people like Andrew out there. You know, they're sort of tearing themselves apart, trying to work out what the right solution is. It's democracy, I'm told by James, to hand the decision back to the people, especially when we were lied to in the first time. We were, Andrew. God, we were lied to. It's a common market. It will not threaten your essential national sovereignty in any way at all. I think in many ways, probably, maybe the greatest lie that's ever been told to the British public. And they kept that lie going for nearly 45 years. Then we got another chance and we said, enough with you. Done. We wish to govern ourselves. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 10:45. Passions here, and a lot of you ringing up today and sort of even trying to tease it out yourselves. You know, a Remainer who feels very divided but thinks maybe Mrs May's deal's the right compromise. And in a way, I understand that, because really Mrs May's deal is a Remainers Brexit. It doesn't really take us out. She's right, though, I think, when she says on the big picture that it would be an unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy. And Article 50, which 500 MPs voted for, was very clear. Either we have a withdrawal agreement or we just leave. That should be the choice. But I'm afraid there are many saying Brexit should be stopped. I think that is an outrage. I'm off to Shaftesbury in Dorset to speak to Louise. Good morning, Louise.
Morning, Nigel.
So, is she right to say that it would break our trust in democracy?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to just introduce a little bit about my background. I'm a training barrister. I've read EU law. And I'd first like to say that reading EU law 6-7 years ago was the biggest eye-opener I've ever had, especially the 1972 Communities Act. What concerns me about that is that we actually, the powers the EU law, that the EU have had over the UK since going back to 1972. I'll go on to the democracy point that you're making.
Yeah.
What really concerns me about Mrs May is that she's actually using the psychology of let's all move on, but she's not actually going into detail about WTO and just how it won't affect the UK once we go into the WTO. It's all about do my deal or else. Do my deal or else. Do my deal or else.
My way or the highway, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm just that really worries me. And the other thing that is even the biggest worry, which is obviously about your debate this morning. I didn't actually vote, I have to confess, last time. I was a bit wrapped up in I'm going to be a barrister, let the country decide, I'll support whatever you decide, and I would now vote to leave. And when I was actually reading EU law, there wasn't one professor who said the EU worked in its current form. Now, that wasn't one. I can't say what university I was at, but there wasn't one that said it worked.
So you're convinced, and you understand EU law, and of course it's very different to our common law system in many ways. Ours is in terms of liberty and freedom, ours is a much better system. I've thought that for many years. But Louise.
Well, look, it's a great idea. Nobody can dispute it's a great idea, and we haven't got time to go into the real backdrop to why the EU really was set up. But actually, the real issue that we're now faced with, the country is faced with, is she doesn't follow through with the choices that there was on that ballot sheet, leave or stay. Next time I go to vote, and I think this is the bottom line, what's the point?
What's the point? Do you know what? That, I think, very succinctly sums up the way an increasing number of people in this country feel it. Louise, thank you for your call. What's the point? Says Louise, and that is how serious all of this is, certainly in my view. Jane in Suffolk makes a similar point. She says, look, for me, this is not about leaving or staying in the EU. It's about the establishment ignoring the will of the people. And again, Jane, a point very well put. Steve is a brand new caller from Camberwell. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. Just to say, although it's not really what I want to talk about, I describe myself as a Remain Democrat, although in fact I actually abstained in the 2006 referendum.
16.
I think 2016 referendum.
Yeah.
I think Remain is the best position for us to be in. But as a Democrat, I think you've got to take notice of what people voted for in 2016. Now, I think there is a democratic answer to the problem, which would be to have, and I'll call it, to make it absolutely clear, a ratification referendum. A ratification referendum simply means that Mrs May's deal is put to the people only. Now, that means that you, Mr Farage, would get to vote on it, and so would I. And if that deal was then passed by the people, then she would win. If it was rejected by the people, then the Conservative Party would have to choose a new leader. Perhaps they could choose Johnson, Rees-Mogg or something like that.
Steve,
then you could have a general election.
Steve, hang on. This formula would make this go on for year after year after year.
Well, we're getting into a terrible mess, I think, at the moment, and we've got people talking about violence and this and that. So if we don't choose a democratic path to do it, then I tell you what, we're going to get into, I think, a very bad situation. Now, a ratification referendum does not have, let's just repeat this and make it clear, it does not have the option to remain on it. All it has on it is, do you accept Mrs May's deal or not? In other words, it's the same thing that Parliament is going to vote on, for or against Mrs May's deal.
Given Steve, okay, yeah. I hear what you say, and by the way, I think having a second referendum would be an awful thing for all sorts of reasons.
Well, a second usually includes the Remain questions, and that's the big danger, that you get the Remain question. You reopen the whole thing. Now, I'm not in favour of doing that.
Article 50, Steve, right? Article 50 that 500 MPs voted for, right? Article 50 says, we either have a withdrawal agreement or, and I'm quoting directly from a document here, or failing that, 2 years after notification, we leave. So if there was to be a second referendum, to be honest...
A ratification referendum, Nigel, not a second referendum.
So then it would be... So then it would be... So then it would be the withdrawal agreement or no deal, wouldn't it, according to Article 50?
It would be the deal that we've charged the government to go off after the 2016 to come up with a deal to meet. Now, Theresa May says the deal that she's got does the business as far as she's concerned. Now, Parliament is not going to accept that for different reasons. I don't think. I'd be surprised if they did. But we, the people who sent her off to do this, why don't we get to judge? Now, I actually think that leavers like yourself and Remainers like me would all vote it down in a national referendum as well. So that would put it to bed, to be honest. I'm
going to say, Steve, the last opinion polling I saw on this, when people were given their options of what they wanted, showed support for Mrs May's deal on about 11%. So it wouldn't pass, would it?
It wouldn't pass. It would go down. At that point, the possibility of the Tory party choosing a different leader, one that actually was what you would call a hard Brexiteer, if you want to put it.
I wouldn't. No, I've never used the term hard Brexit. It's just Brexit.
Okay, listen. Let's not get caught up in something. Somebody who
I'm teasing you, Steve.
in a leaving either by agreement or not, but actually leaving everything. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, no, I do.
Something that Boris Johnson, yourself, and Jacob Rees-Mogg would all agree with. That could be the Tory party election pitch in a general election.
All right, Steve. Steve, I'm going to move on. I thank you. You've offered a way out of it, but I think it just prolongs things. That's my view. Guy is a new caller from Wandsworth. Good morning, Guy.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm having a wonderful time. Loving every minute of it, Guy.
I'm diametrically on the opposite side of the spectrum on this issue to you, to you, Nigel. So I think a second referendum is exactly what the country needs. I welcome it. I'm delighted we've got to the place we are now. And just to take you up on your point about the triggering of Article 50, you're absolutely right to suggest that there was an enormous majority for it in the Commons. But at the time, we were in a very different place, weren't we? For example, now we have 10 ongoing investigations, some of which I think are criminal, some of which perhaps otherwise, into the conduct of the various facets of the Leave campaign.
That's hardly a surprise, Guy, given who's doing hardly a surprise given who's doing the investigating, is it? But there we are, Guy. I tell you what is remarkable about your line is that the people voted to leave. They backed it up in a general election. We then had our MPs. I'd like to take issue with that as well, Nigel, if I may, because I voted tactically in Battersea. I voted Tory. I'm not particularly party loyalty, right? So I voted Tory in 2015 because I thought Cameron would do a better job, something I massively regret, I have to say. But I voted tactically for a Labour candidate in Battersea, which changed it from blue to red, with a £5,000 majority, because Labour were kind of angling for a slightly softer position, and to achieve precisely the sort of parliamentary arithmetic and the impasse that we have now. So to trot out the fact that 85% of people voted for parties supporting Brexit is
extremely misleading.
Well, I'll tell you what, Guy. 75% of our MPs voted for Article 50, and they voted for either a withdrawal agreement or leaving with no deal, and that is being betrayed. Do you think, Guy, we should simply just abolish democracy and just put the clever people in charge?
No, I just think the legitimacy of the vote has been massively called into question, and these criminal investigations still have a lot of time to run.
They'll go on for the next 40 years. Listen, and no doubt, Guy, you can read certain newspapers that will tell you that I was funded by the Russians and many other things. The fact is, the establishment just won't accept the result. Guy, thank you for your call. Now, I thought it was interesting yesterday that the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, came out with a very strong statement. Was he just trying to protect the future of the Conservative Party, or was he genuinely worried? But he said that blocking Brexit could lead to a surge in far-right extremism. Never far left, is it? Far-right extremism in the UK. He said that not leaving the EU would mean the 17 million people who voted Brexit would feel cheated, and we've heard a few of those in the last hour. It could be the end of moderate politics. Do you think Grayling is right? And tell me, do you identify more with being either a Brexiteer or a Remainer than you do being Tory or Labour? Is the whole of British politics about to break apart in all sorts of ways? Let me know. If you feel that you're more Brexit than Tory or Labour, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe your party still matters to you more than Brexit. Text to 84850. Watch us on Facebook. We're live next. So the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, has warned that if Brexit is not delivered, if Brexit is even delayed, that it could lead to a surge in far-right extremism in the United Kingdom. He says that people would feel cheated and that could be the end of moderate politics. Now, I think there may be a little bit of selfish party interest in this, namely what he really thinks is the Conservative Party could be destroyed and replaced by something else, or certainly challenged and threatened by something else, and that something else may not be a far-anything party. It might just be a party that actually believes in Brexit. The use of this term far-right is interesting. It's used again and again by our political class and much of our media, as if to say the only people that really support Brexit are the far right, which flies completely in the face, of course, of what's going on in France at the moment, where many of the yellow vest protesters and many of the people, and there's been, a lot of this has been pretty violent stuff. And everyone forgets, Marine Le Pen, the far right, they're the Eurosceptics. Hang on a second. There's a bloke called Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's on about 18% in the opinion polls. He is far left. And he, goodness me, if you heard him speak about the European Union, you'd think I was a bleeding heart liberal who lived in Hampstead. All right? And similarly, Mr. Tsipras, the Prime Minister of Greece. Well, not for much longer, I don't think. That coalition is on the edge of collapsing as we speak. But Tsipras became Prime Minister with a left wing. We must not put up with the EU's austerity. We can't be told what to do by the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund. So this idea that opposition to the European project purely on the far right is complete and utter nonsense. We see that across much of the rest of Europe. But I do think that people are getting angry. And the anger is not on the Remain side, because after all, they're having quite a good time of this, really. I mean, one of the callers we just had, a Remainer, doesn't think Mrs May's deal's perfect, but hey, it's okay. I mean, Remainers can be quite happy with Mrs May's deal, because we're not really leaving at all. In fact, in many areas, potentially, with intelligence and defence, we're getting in even more deeply with the European Union. No, it is the Remain, it is the Leavers who are angry. And I think people like Vince Cable, Sir Vince Cable, and I like him on a personal level. But let's just hear what Sir Vince had to say this morning.
I think Parliament will take control of this process, will insist that we pursue the option of no Brexit. It can happen in one of two ways. It can happen simply by cancelling Article 50, which I think would be resented by lots of people.
Yeah, me.
Or it can happen by Parliament saying, actually, we go back to the public to have the final say through a people's vote. I think that is now much more likely.
Resented? Oh, it'll be resented all right, Sir Vince. So we either just scrap the whole thing, say it's all been a terrible mistake, or we go through the agony of a second referendum. And it is that attitude. It is that attitude that is angering people. Now, to be fair to Vince Cable, he, of course, did vote against Article 50. He was one of 100 or so MPs that voted against Article 50. So he is not breaking his promise in quite the same way that hundreds of others of them potentially will do in the course of the next 8 or 9 days. But is Chris Grayling right to think this? But underneath this, folks, is something changing, I think, that is rather more fundamental. And it's this. I think the arguments around whether you're a firm Remainer or a firm Brexiteer are emotionally far bigger than perhaps your draw to the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. And I think, I would speculate, that this is the first time that this has happened in modern British political time. So I'm asking you, which to you is more important? Is it your alignment to a political party, and I'm talking particularly about Labour and Tory here, or is it your feelings about Brexit and Remain? And if it is the latter, are we potentially looking at a situation where the Brexit vote was just the first earthquake, and there are some massive earthquakes to come, including a complete change in our party structure in this country? So let me know if you think Brexit is more important to me than any party that I've aligned with or voted for my whole life. Tell me why on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, no, actually, Brexit is but one issue. There are many other things out there in the country, like tax, the National Health Service, and that's why I'm sticking with Tory or sticking with Labour, and Brexit's of secondary importance. Then please text to 84850. And would no Brexit, I mean, would if Johnny Major and Sir Vince got their way and we just cancelled the whole thing, would that perhaps lead to more street protest and outrages and growth of, would there be the growth of a far-right party, the real growth of a far-right party in British politics, which is worth debating? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course you can watch us live on Facebook or Periscope and comment there too. Alex is a new caller from Walsall. Welcome to LBC. Good morning, Alex.
Hi, Nigel. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak to you. So, I mean, I'm sort of speculating here, Alex. For about 100 years, British politics has been totally dominated by whether we're Labour or Conservative voters, and that in some ways, or very often, that tribal allegiance has been stronger and deeper than any one political issue. And I'm suggesting that, I could be wrong, but I'm suggesting that might be changing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's all anyone ever hears about now, isn't it? I mean, you aren't to flick on the news and something about no deal, or whether there's a report from the CBI or something saying that it's going to be catastrophe.
So we're all doomed. We're doomed. Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I know. So yes, you're right, Alex. It dominates debate absolutely everywhere, and I sense, not just in the media, I think sort of in the pubs and clubs and socially where people go, it is being talked about all the time. But I mean, Alex, let me ask you. I mean, who do you normally vote for?
Well, I'm only 19. I voted once in the 2017 election. I voted Conservative. I assume that Walsall's very, all the West Midlands is very, one year it could be Tory, the next it could be Labour,
The West Midlands, Alex, time and again, swings general elections. In 1970, it was the West Midlands that got Mr Heath into office, and in 74, it was the West Midlands that got him out of office. So, yeah, you are living, not just in the heart of England, but literally at the heart of our national debate.
Exactly, and the Walsall Council, when it was Labour and Lib Dem coalition, it looked like a war ground. To be fair, I'm a Conservative voter. I'd never vote Labour.
But Alex, why did you? And you'd have been 18, so it was your first vote. Did you vote Tory because they weren't Labour? Did you vote Tory because you love the blue brand, or did you vote Tory because you're a Leaver or any other? What was the reason that at 18 you voted Conservative?
I've always been kind of interested in politics a bit, but it's either Conservative or Labour, isn't it? Really, that's going to win. So you have to kind of decide whether you're more, you're more left or more right, and I've always been more right than left.
And are your parents and are your family of that persuasion too?
Oh God, my dad is. He hates Labour, hates Tory,
okay.
but he'll vote on whoever suits the IT industry most, I think.
Okay, well, we all vote. Alex, we vote for lots of different reasons, but you voted Conservative.
Yeah.
If Mrs May was to make an absolute mess of the Brexit deal, would you go on voting Conservative?
Honestly, I don't know, because how do they put Theresa May in the first place? Now, I get the argument that she's firm, she defies all opposition, but she as you all I watch you on LBC all the time. She always says she is a Remainer, and she just is. It's
I know she is. Alex, let me just ask you this: back in the 1970s, when the National Front, who were the far right party of the time. Their biggest election success came in West Bromwich, where they got 18% in a by-election. I can't remember, 1974, 75, but one of those years. So the West Midlands is an area that, it's marginal Tory Labour, but it also has seen the rise of protest politics. And UKIP, and I utterly reject anybody telling me it was far right when I was leader of it, but UKIP achieved some. But I really do. But UKIP achieved some astonishing results in Dudley and other places like that around the West Midlands. Do you think there's a danger, living where you do, that if Brexit gets stopped or delayed, of a rise of extremist politics in the West Midlands?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest, because where I'm from. It's always been kind of, an edgy kind of, things happen in the West Midlands, you know what I mean? Like, especially, politically.
No, they do. No, they do.
I don't know if you saw on the news a couple of weeks ago, that family had Nazi, sympathies and that name. They'd get Adolf or something ridiculous like that. That happened in the Midlands.
I did see that,
There's a lot of things that happen.
Well, I'll tell you what, Alex, with or without Brexit, the less of that we have, the better. Alex, I'm going to run. I'm going to move on. I'm off to Ghana, believe it or not, to speak to Jay. Good morning.
Hello, Nigel. Good morning to you. Yes, nice to see you a few months ago down in Christchurch on Market Day with your battle bus.
Right, okay.
I can't tell you how much we appreciate everything you're doing. But anyway, I'm here in Central Region, about halfway between Accra and Cape Coast. Uh-huh. And I just wanted to say to everybody back home, the way things are being interpreted here in Africa, the danger of what is going on at Westminster, and the fact that people here, the educated people here in Ghana, the elites, the business people, those sort of people, are very worried about the message that tampering with the democratic vote is sending out to despots and, corrupt leaders throughout Africa. They're tampering with the vote. They don't understand why we haven't already left. They don't understand the actions of Tony Blair, Dominic Grieve, Anna Soubry. They can't get their heads around it at all. There was a clear vote, and David Cameron couldn't have been more clear when he laid out the terms for the referendum. Mm-hmm. And there was a majority, and people here just think that the elites in the UK tampering with the vote in the way that they are.
Very interesting, Jay.
Sending out a very dangerous signal.
Very interesting. I mean, there's this big row in Congo going on at the moment after their elections. But of course, Ghana, a Commonwealth country, and I talked about my meeting with these Australian political figures on Friday. Again, Commonwealth country, 2.4 billion people now living in the Commonwealth, a common bond. And Jay, I think your point's interesting, that we are losing as a country respect, but equally almost incredulity from Jay in Ghana and the people that he's speaking to, that the mother of parliaments of all the places in the world could be the place where the democratic will may well be overturned in the course of the next few days, which could lead, Chris Grading says, to extremism. Jay, thank you. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 16 minutes past 11. A lot of people feeling conflicted out there, because how you feel about Brexit and where it should go and which political party you've normally supported, it's quite difficult in some cases to marry one with the other. Charles in Palmer's Green, he's struggling. He says, I was born in the UK, but I'm the son of European immigrants. I've got an MA in European studies. I've studied the EU. I've voted Remain. I'm a strong EU supporter, but I love democracy a lot more than I love the European Union. We voted Leave, and so we should. But as a lifelong Conservative voter, I am much conflicted. Charles in Palmer's Green, a lot of people out there are much conflicted. And I am speculating this morning with you. I'm speculating and saying that there are many families in this country who've been Conservative for the last 100 years, Labour for the last 100 years, and have varied that vote hardly at all over that century of time. And yet, that tribal allegiance, not letting the other lot in under our first-past-the-post system, has quite often mattered more than policies themselves, which seems remarkable, but kind of with first-past-the-post politics, that's what you tend to get. But I now think our feelings about whether, our self-identifying, can I say, as whether we are Leavers or Brexiteers is starting to become stronger. Alex in Norfolk says, I'm definitely more Brexit than Labour or Conservative, simply because these two parties have gone. We now have two spineless parties who just appease whichever minority complains the loudest, leaving to an unprincipled shower in Parliament. Great sort of Terry Thomas word, that. And yeah, a lot of Leavers feeling like that. And I wonder whether, perhaps there are quite a few Remainers who feel that the Labour Party is impossible for them with Corbyn as leader, or maybe the Conservative Party is impossible with May's withdrawal. I don't know. Why is the left held in such high regard when they're just as bad as the right, says Adrian. And I made the point earlier, it's always the fear of the far right, but the far left can be a pretty scary place as well. And just look at what happened in Germany this week, when a politician, an elected member of the national parliament, was beaten up in the street in Bremen, and it was the hard left sort of Antifa types that did it, and he very, very nearly died. So there can be some pretty appalling behaviour on both ends of the political spectrum. It's interesting. I'm a huge fan of Churchill, and Churchill hated both of the extremes of politics, and I think that's probably about the right place for us to be. I am going to Romford to speak to Catherine. Catherine, do you identify with a party now, or are you more of a Brexiteer or a Remainer?
I definitely identify as a Brexiteer more than any loyalty to any political party. Mm-hmm. And I actually had the chance to briefly speak to you at a Leave Means Leave rally in London in December. Okay. And I actually suggested to you that perhaps a Brexit party should be created that doesn't have any right or left-wing leanings. It's a single-party issue to get the UK out of the EU.
Well, Catherine, if Article 50 was just revoked, if we went along with what John Major appallingly wants us to do, then I think there would be a coming together of people, and some sort of party based around Brexit would come along. The question is, Catherine, and people like you would vote for it because you're now more Brexit than you are Tory or Labour, and that's perfectly clear. Whether it would succeed or not is, of course, a different question.
Well, I think you have 17.4 million people who would potentially be voting for that party. So, and at the moment, the problem is with the parliamentary arithmetic. 75% of the MPs in Parliament are Remain-leaning. So it is very difficult to get Brexit through. If you can create a new party based on a single issue of Brexit, that could potentially change that parliamentary arithmetic and finally get Brexit through.
Well, it would depend on a couple of things, wouldn't it? And one of them would be whether we identify, whether those how many of those 17.4 million identify as Brexit over being Labour and over being Tory. And I think there is a process there, Catherine, that we're going through. And I think you're early in that process, in that you've already identified Brexit's what matters for me more than parties. Catherine, I'm not underestimating for a moment what you're saying. I do think this issue has the possibility to completely change the landscape of British politics, and it might be rather healthy, actually, mightn't it?
I mean, I think it's also a question of democracy as well. So it's, it's whether people support that the people's democratic vote should be respected and adhered to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Big issues at play. Catherine, thank you. And Catherine is one of those who, as I speculated earlier, she now thinks it's Brexit that matters. To hell with the mainstream parties. Paul in Bristol's a twin and a firm Brexiteer, but his twin brother was Brexit but now isn't. Why? He doesn't now trust the government to control the country. Well, to success post-Brexit. Again, this is all part of that breaking down of trust. It's all part of what I think is... I don't think we're anywhere that far down the road, but I think we're beginning to think that our views on Brexit matter more than which parties we identify with. On Twitter I get, if a party cannot enact policies required by the voter, nor even put them on their manifesto, then Brexit has to come above parties, because without it, we are impotent. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a political argument, but I'm dealing less here with political arguments and more with, is there a shift going on out there? I mean, if you're a Remainer that normally votes Labour, if Corbyn and co stay in power and are not endorsing a second referendum, and certainly apparently not endorsing the revocation of Article 50, do you then leave the Labour Party and start voting for Vince Cable? I mean, that's what I'm asking. Abu is a new caller from Aldgate in East London. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for having me this morning.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So tell me, are you a Leaver or are you a Remainer, Abu?
I'm a Leaver.
You're a Leaver, right? And can I also ask, who do you normally vote for in general elections?
I voted for Conservative, my first election ever.
Right, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if the Conservatives were to mess up Brexit, would you stay with the Conservatives, or would you be tempted, because Brexit means so much to you, to shift your vote somewhere else?
All right, Nigel. Can I just take this opportunity to throw this in the mix? Yeah?
Yeah, go on.
40 years ago, Britain sleepwalked into this nonsense called European Union. Yeah?
Yep.
By the establishment. And now, the establishment are trying to make us not coming out of it. You know,
yep.
People are begging every day for them to be independent. We are begging to be dependent. You know, that is what I am seeing from, I'm not English, you know, I'm British. You know, I came from Sierra Leone.
Okay.
Right? So that is how I look at it. So if bringing you now to the program in particular, as a Leaver, okay, I voted to leave because of independence. I need to be independent. I should not be dependent on any other nation. And I stood firm on the values of Britain, because since my country was colonized by Britain. Okay, so now, if for any reason the establishment, you know, try to stop this, and I can say this categorically, like when they were campaigning, when you guys were campaigning for Brexit, I said, we're going to leave the European Union. I was very, very convinced for the fact that I can hear the rhetoric from the poor man, you know, I can hear the rhetoric. And then when the election came, we won. And I can tell the establishment again, as you are trying to manage this second vote, cancelling Article 50, guess what? We go back to the box again, the ballot box again, without using any technology, you know, to play with that result. We're coming out again of the European Union.
You talked, Abu, about independence. So you came from a country that had recently got its independence.
Yeah.
And you moved to a country that was busy surrendering its independence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you know something?
It's so funny.
Do you know something? It's an ironic laugh. I have met so many people from Commonwealth countries who within their lifetimes or their parents' lifetimes saw their countries take their independence and self-government back from the United Kingdom, back from the British Empire, and in most cases they were enormously proud to do so, and they simply can't believe that so much of our parliament now wants to stay dependent upon Brussels. Abu, great call. And, you know, whenever you hear people say, well, of course, Brexit voters are all aged 85 and all white and they're all male, it's nonsense. There's a big diversity of vote on both sides of this argument. But I have met a lot of Commonwealth citizens expressing that view that we just heard from Abu there, who now, of course, are, as you've said very clearly, British citizens. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 11:30 in time for the news with Philip Chrysikos. Well, the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, warns us that if Brexit is delayed, frustrated or stopped, it could lead to a rise of the far right in British politics. But actually, I think what he really is saying, that we're beginning, some of us, to feel that whether we're Brexiteers or Remainers, that matters more to us than our allegiance to the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. And maybe, just maybe, if Brexit gets betrayed, we could see a seismic change in British politics. A lot of you out there are struggling with your consciences. I mean, Tom in Bromley says, give a thought to the dilemma of Tory MPs like mine who support Brexit but have a small majority of their electorate who support Remain. You know, who do I vote for in a general election if the government delays or revokes Brexit? Tom, that dilemma is one that many people are asking themselves. Others like Mary in Ealing have made their minds up. She says, look, I've been a Labour voter for most of my life, but since the Brexit vote, I voted Conservative because I saw them as the only party that might honour the Brexit vote. So Mary wasn't voting Conservative because she suddenly believes in the Conservative Party. She doesn't. She's actually a lifelong Labour voter. But she saw Brexit as being more important than that. And if Brexit can make you change your vote, Mary, from Labour to Tory, presumably you could vote somewhere else as well. And that, I think, is the interesting possibility. Is the far right going to rise in British politics? Well, it could. It could. And I think if we go back to a period in time of about 2005, 6, 7, what we saw was a really significant rise in British National Party votes. Nick Griffin had not long been the leader. They were beginning, particularly in council elections and by-elections in the north of England, to start to get some people elected. They were getting big numbers of the vote. They even in the European elections of 2009 got nearly 1 million people to vote for them, which is slightly higher than the sort of traditional ceiling in this country on parties like that, which probably is nearer 750,000. And I think, and I would put it to any of you, that what stopped the rise of the BNP was UKIP. Because I came along as leader of UKIP in 2006 and said, look, if you're voting BNP as a protest, but you don't really like what they stand for, or some of the people in it, come and vote for us. Because we're going to stand up for tough immigration policies, but without the hatred, without the bias, without the prejudice. So could Chris Grayling, a far-right political force in Britain, start to take off? Well, unless there was a moderate, sensible political force there to check it, it could. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the atmosphere for it is there, but I think something else will come along to stop that from occurring. So I'm actually optimistic about this, but hey, you never know. You never know. And equally, it's hard to read just how angry some people are too. Kevin from Warrington. Kevin, tell me, how do you identify now? Do you identify with a party or with Remain or Brexit?
I'm a Brexiteer.
Oh, right, okay.
I was a long-time Labour voter from the age of 18, and I'm 65 now.
Okay.
But at the last general election, I voted Conservative because I didn't trust Labour to deliver Brexit, and it doesn't look like the Tories are going to deliver it either. So if there's a party that will specifically deliver Brexit, I will vote for them.
Right,
it's a one-subject thing with me.
Right, you're a Brexit voter, doesn't matter what the party label is, an appropriate vehicle, you'll vote for it.
Yes, definitely.
Would you, Kevin, vote for a party that was seen to be on the hard left or hard right if they were Brexiteers?
That wouldn't come into it.
Right, just wouldn't come into it. But, right, no, it's Brexit. That's what matters. You've left the Labour tribe, and you are now a Brexit voter. Kevin,
what's happening is they're playing party politics with Brexit.
Yes,
they're not thinking about the voters.
So, if there was a general election next month, Kevin, who would you vote for right now? That's a hard question.
It is. I'm politically homeless at the moment.
Yeah, I know. I think there's a lot of people like you out there. Kevin, thank you. Kevin, classic. That's what I was looking for, in a sense, when I put my thesis up at the top of the hour. You know, he's from 18 to the age of 65. He's voted Labour in every election. He is now a Brexit voter. And Labour's not really a Brexit... Well, actually, even better question, what on earth is Labour? Where do they stand on any of this, other than they are drifting gradually, aren't they, towards the position of acceptance of a single market, and they're getting closer to advocating a second referendum. But Corbyn knows the moment he does that, there's a lot of Kevins out there. In fact, there's 5 million Kevins out there. There's 5 million of them, and a lot of them living in the Midlands, the north of England and South Wales. Those three regions comprising, getting on for a third of the population of the United Kingdom, and that's where the big Labour Leave voters are. Big problem for Corbyn. Peter is a new caller from Folkestone in Kent. Good morning, Peter.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
I'm fascinated, actually. I mean, the last hour just drives me bonkers, seeing what our parliamentarians are doing. But whether it could actually radically change politics, because the emotions around Brexit are stronger, or potentially stronger, than the emotions around parties, is a really fascinating debate.
Yeah, I'm fizzing angry. I believe that if the current situation is played out, that you'd effectively kill democracy in this country. Because people, it's nothing to do with, you'll stop being able to vote. People just won't believe in voting anymore. And I hope that the outcome from this is that we break the monopoly of this two-party state that we've got, which is really left and slightly less left, and actually go to a future where we have a broad spectrum of political views. I know you spent a lot of time in the United States. I'm a libertarian. I believe in free trade, free commerce, and the idea that Labour can go out and negotiate with the EU when we all know that the EU insists you can't nationalise the railways, you can't nationalise industries. It's against those policies. It's just lies upon lies upon lies. And to be honest with you, I'm really ticked off about it.
But Peter, if we had a system. If we had, for example, the AV Plus system, where you would be able to vote or not to vote for your current MP in Folkestone, but on a second ballot paper, the last 20% of seats in Parliament would get made up with how we vote on that list. Then I think we would see a genuine multiplicity of views in Parliament. We'd see a much better debate. We'd see people able to speak freely on the subjects they loved and cared about without the whips threatening to, do something awful to them or deselect them. But isn't the real problem here, Peter, and we sort of spent a bit of time getting to this, but isn't the real problem here the first-past-the-post electoral system?
Well, the first-past-the-post system is the problem. I don't think what you proposed is the solution. The idea that we have representative democracy only works if the representatives agree with the electorate. And we are seeing that today, that the electorate have voted one way, and because the political elites don't like the vote we've got, we're in this mess, aren't we?
Yeah, but I mean, Peter, if we had PR, then given what's happening with Brexit, if there was a general election tomorrow, a reasonably well-organised party that wanted to honour, as they saw it, Brexit, would win 120 seats, no problem at all. Given our Given our current system now, they'd be lucky to win too.
Oh, the irony when your party got 4 million votes and didn't get a seat, unlike the SNP got 3 million votes and got 50. We should have all woken up then and said, there's something clearly wrong with it. But we didn't.
Actually, Peter, the UKIP vote that year was bigger than the SNP, added up together with the Lib Dems and Plaid. But anyway, there we are. So no one knows more about the difficulty of breaking this system than I do, but I think in the 4 years that have gone by, I think our feelings about this subject are even stronger as compared with our devotion to any individual party. Peter, I thank you very much indeed for your call. If a general election is called after May loses Tuesday's vote, I wonder who will lead the Conservatives into the election, what their manifesto would be, and whether anyone would believe them. Well, that's the key. Who would believe them? Why would you believe them? That is the real problem here. Horrifying to hear how we're being viewed by some African and Commonwealth countries. I thought Jay's call from Ghana was interesting, wasn't it? That, amongst the sort of administrative classes and professional classes, and clearly he's working out there in Ghana, they're saying, well, how on earth can democracy be fiddled about with in the country that gave us the mother of parliaments and that ruled us for all this period of time until we got our independence? Folks, we used to be respected all over the world as being the nation that developed the model of parliamentary democracy, that believed in the rule of law. Difficult to underestimate exactly how high our status was across the globe just a few decades ago. It's not looking like that now, and it's really pretty sad. I'm off to Chalfont St Peter to speak to Peter, another new caller to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. To let you know, I am a Leaver, have been a Leaver since we started this. My feeling at the moment, we've got a problem in what do we do if the Leave is taken off the list. I think now is the time that all those who want to leave should make their politicians aware that if for any reason that came off of the paper, the actual Leave for some reason, one of the suggestions is we take Theresa May's or we remain. No, what we want is the Leave. If for any reason that disappears, I think our politicians should know that people like me will not vote Labour, we will not vote Conservative, we will certainly not vote Liberal or Green. So what does this offer us? I don't know. An independent, the National Cats Home, whatever is on the paper.
I mean, where is Lord Such? Where is Lord Such, Peter? I mean, Lord Such is Monster Ravia, and I know Alan Hope, the current leader, and he's great fun, but he hasn't got quite the profile. I mean, Lord Such in this environment could do rather well, couldn't he?
He could indeed. Yes, it's the options we're being given. I think our politicians need to be told that if they do this to us, we will, in some way, on the political voting front, make sure they don't get in, whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, it is shifting voting patterns. I mean, we had Guy on earlier, who's a Conservative, but he voted Labour over Brexit, and equally, we've had people on saying that they were Labour all their lives, and now they're voting Conservative. Peter, you will, at the next election, are you looking for a new party to vote for, Peter?
Politicians have got a problem, really, now with me, with credibility. If it was people who've got a good track record at the moment on Leave, and there was enough of them, then yes, I would vote for them. My fear is that there are a lot of politicians out there who would look at it and say, yeah, it's a good time to jump. I have a feeling that a lot of the politicians today, it's a career. When they finish university, what shall I be, a Tory, a Labour?
Absolutely.
I don't really mind. I'll be a Tory.
Never had a proper job in their lives, Peter.
Absolutely. The old, I don't know, the people who were committed, I didn't like Margaret Thatcher, but she had a view, she stuck with it, she told us what she wanted to do.
She did.
So many now, ducking, diving, they really have lost all credibility, I think.
A lot of people out there, a lot of Leavers out there, thank you, Peter, a lot of Leavers out there saying they are now Leavers. That matters more than party identity. I've only had one of you say I'm a Remainer, and I'm shifted. Keen to hear from more Remainers. Are you more Remain than you are Labour or Conservative? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 11:46. Actually, think of how many thousands of doors I've knocked on, or people I've met in street markets over a quarter of a century being involved with all of this. But the number of times I've been told, it's very interesting, Mr Farage, thank you, but we're Labour. It's very interesting, Mr Farage, thank you, we're Conservative. So, well, what about the... No. We're Labour. We're Conservative. Please don't bother me with detail. Couldn't care less about policy. This is who we are. And we like this lot, and we hate the other lot. They're awful. They're ghastly. Imagine if they won the next election. And it's been about this kind... And much of it goes back to the class system of 100 years ago. And a lot of it is about our electoral system. I think that is changing. Shirley in Birmingham certainly thinks so. She says she's very Conservative in the past and UKIP in the past. But she says Brexit has to come first. We won and we have to leave entirely. Shirley, there's a lot of Brexiteers feeling like that. I sense it's not quite so strong with Remainers because, in a sense, they've got a fair bit of choice out there, haven't they? I mean, if you're a softish Remainer, you've got Mrs May's deal. That's all right, isn't it? Sort of half in, half out, linked in militarily, stuck in the customs union for the next, I don't know how many decades it's going to be, and with the Irish backstop to sort of make sure that's actually the case. Or you can go the whole Vince Cable United States of Europe route, or you can go for the Greens, or you can go for the SNP, and Labour is edging towards your position. And that's why this morning I'm getting fewer of you coming on saying Remain's what matters more than my party identity with Labour, because you've got other choices. Leavers are not feeling like that. At least that's what I tend to think. Dawn says, on Facebook, I'm politically homeless as a Brexiteer. Dee is a new caller from Reading in Berkshire. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. This is a first. I never thought I'd be speaking to you.
Well, there you are. Well, I don't bite, I promise you. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, I find this really a very interesting conversation.
Yep.
I'm a Remainer, and one of the issues that I think, I'm just going to chuck something else into the mix, is that I do think, I have no scientific evidence to back this up, but one of the issues I do think that has been missed is that the people that tended to vote Remain seem to be more progressive than those who voted Leave. That is just my personal opinion, just based on things that I've seen and things that I've heard. I think that...
Well, whether that's right or not, how does that affect their allegiance, do you think?
It affects their allegiance because, from what I've heard, it would seem as though the people that voted Leave seem to me to be afraid of change. I've heard you talk about people seeing their neighbourhoods changing, seeing that everything around them changing at a pace which they were not comfortable with, rightly or wrongly. I'm not casting any aspersions on that.
Actually, Leave voters want change desperately. Leave is an anti-status quo vote. Leave is a vote that says we want real change, genuine change. You could argue that it's against change that it sees as negative, and I understand that. But Dee, whether or not, one side is more progressive than the other. You as a Remainer, I'm going to put this to you. I'm going to put this to you. That you as a Remainer, at the moment, have a fair bit of political choice, don't you?
I do. I think I do, and I would agree with you completely with that. I mean, I'm a Labour. I have been a Labour voter. I've been Labour as long as I can remember. It saddens me greatly, and I do feel politically homeless in that regard. It saddens me greatly that Labour has not come out for the people's vote, because I was one of those Remainers who said, OK, we've had the vote, fine, I'll take it. Yeah. I would happily have been a Leaver if I saw something to make me believe that it was the right thing to do. And what I have seen, unfortunately, and I do feel for Leavers, I genuinely do, because I feel that they were promised certain things that were not deliverable, are clearly not deliverable. And you've had Theresa May, who, for me, again, my personal view is I think she's the worst Prime Minister ever.
Oh, I'm absolutely at one with you, Dee. Yes. She's
the worst Prime Minister ever.
I agree with Dee.
Because we rushed into this whole thing, triggering Article 50, and there was no plan. And it just seems now, because of the nature of Brexit, I'm still not sure what it is. Theresa May is saying, this is Brexit, and you have Leavers saying, well, no, that's not the Brexit that I voted for. So I feel I genuinely, my heart goes out to Leavers, because what they're now homeless. Saying is that they do feel homeless as well. They feel absolutely homeless
but, they really do. And your difficulty, Dee, is that if we had proportional representation, there would be, a centre-left socialist party that was unavowedly for a second referendum, for joining the euro, for all of it, okay? And you'd better go and vote for them without any difficulty. But under our first past the post system, the reason that you're feeling a little bit homeless is, of course, Corbyn's dilemma is this. There are 5 million Labour voters that voted Brexit. So what does he do?
Well, that's the nature of leadership. You take what you're given and you have to find a way through. I think unfortunately, we've had a referendum already on changing the voting system, and people didn't want it.
Well, that was a bad choice, though, Dee, wasn't it? I mean, I'd wanted us to have that opportunity, and in the end, what we were offered was a system that wasn't even proportional; it was preferential, and that nobody could sum up in a sentence. It was awful. It was terrible. Dee, let me just ask you. Let me just ask you one last question here. When Chris Grayling warns that he thinks there could be a growth of the far right if Brexit is delayed or cancelled, do you think he's right?
if I'm truly honest, I wouldn't trust Chris Grayling with a pencil. I don't
let
think
alone
that
HS2.
The far right have always been here.
Mm-hmm.
They're just now much more vocal. When you open Pandora's box, you cannot be upset at what comes out of it. And I think that because, this is my view, and I'm just basing it on what I have seen, Brexit opened the door and they walked straight through. So it's not a case of, oh, well, they're on their way. No, they're already here. And considering that Brexit was about taking back control, why are they not taking control of this? It is happening right now. And so surely... We've
always had a bit of far left and a bit of far right, Dee, haven't we?
Absolutely. I'm no fan of the far left either.
No, good. Dee,
fan of the far left either.
Lovely to speak to you. Great. Do call again. Thank you. I'm going to go off. I've got time for one more caller. I'm going to go to Jay, who's calling from Barnet. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
And to you, thank you.
The dictionary definition of fascism is a contempt for democracy.
Yep.
And that's all the Remain people have shown, a contempt for... You didn't know what you were voting for.
And you're stupid.
Vote because of this, because of that. Armand Danucci on the Robert Peston show, when he was plugging his film about Stalin, said we have to redefine democracy if Brexit and Trump come into power.
I know. You can't believe it, Jay, can you?
No, I can't believe it, but that's fascism. But what kind of fascism? It's passive-aggressive fascism. It's not outright fascism. The Nazis were a socialist left-wing party. They weren't right-wing.
To begin with,
Left-wing. He wasn't right-wing. I'm against the right-wing, all of them, the stupidity of these people. But this is fascism. You're like the emperor's new clothes. You pointed out, you're the little kid who's pointed out, look at the EU, It's not democratic. It's not...
Well, a lot of people agree, Jay, but unfortunately it's not being delivered. Just quickly, Jay, we're running out of time. Chris Grayling warns about the rise of the far right. Doesn't mention the far left, but is he right to think that if Brexit is frustrated, we'll see more extremism in the UK?
I do. Think of the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, where everybody was following Miss Jean Brodie, and she's the best, and it turns out that she was a supporter of El Duce, the fascists in Spain. That's how it is. People don't see it. They don't realise democracy is sacrosanct. Theresa May, much dislike her, she's tried her best, and she's an intelligent woman.
Well, that's okay. That's okay, Jay. Thank you. Theresa May's tried her best, but her deal's no good. Let's reject it, and under Article 50, which 500 MPs voted for, it's perfectly clear we then leave with no deal. Anything aside from that is an outrage. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 in what's going to be a big historic week. At 3 this afternoon, it's Ian Payne, but up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, an employment judge has ruled that university lecturer Dr. Andrew Dunn, who is a branch chairman for UKIP in Lincoln, does not have a right to be anti-PC after he claimed that left-wing colleagues hounded him out. Is PC culture becoming a new religion, with speaking your mind as the new heresy? Before that, Sir John Major today demands that the government should revoke Article 50 to halt Britain's departure from the EU and hand control to Parliament instead. Is the former Tory PM correct? But first, Sir Vince Cable has signalled that he is prepared to help install Jeremy Corbyn in Downing Street if he backs a new EU referendum. Is a Labour